All right, our next guest speaker, Anil Bhandari, is an inspired innovator, technologist, thought leader. His focus area has been around information risk management. He serves as a mentor and a thought leader and provides invaluable insights for future growth and development of Arcon. He mentors the product technology team, roadmap, and his insightful knowledge in areas of risk management, internal audits, and regular compliance. Anil brings his expert domain knowledge in banking, financial services, as well as telecommunications. He is also an internationally recognized thought leader in the subject of governance, risk management, and compliance. Please put your hands together for a warm welcome for Anil.
Thank you so much.
Anil.
Thank you so
sir.
much. Well, a very good afternoon to all of you, ladies and gentlemen, in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. I'm essentially going to talk to you about today is identities. And interestingly, I was in Vegas just 10 days back, and I was speaking at the Gartner's Identity Access Management Conference, which is one of the biggest conferences that they have. And I kind of started by saying that, how do you have an identity conference in Vegas? Because you're supposed to forget your identities, right? Having said that, why am I trying to bring this out today here? Because I strongly believe, and that's my personal belief, that your digital avatar is likely to take over your identities in the next maybe 5 or 10 years. And today, what I'm going to talk to you about is nothing technical. It's nothing to do with the product. It is to do with our understanding of what our digital identity is and how do you look at evolution of identities across the world. I strongly believe identities are nothing but diversity in humanity. And our response to what is expected to come, and believe me, it's very, very interesting, is to build contextual data models. Because security of the future is likely to be contextual in nature. The data that you have and the data that I have could be the same. But you may need to protect it because the gentleman said there that there were almost 13 or 14 standards that you have to probably comply. But I may not need to protect the data because the context in which I hold the data does not require any protection. Well, having said this, let me try and request all of you here today to probably spend next 10 or 15 minutes with me trying to reimagine identities. And again, I'm requesting nothing to do with technology for a moment. Let's talk about identities and evolution 5 years from now, and then maybe we can talk about identities and evolution 20 years from now. I think 5 years from now is likely to be the age of digital identities. But hey, I think all of you here would probably come back and tell me that digital identities are already here. Well, maybe not. And what I'm looking at is identities, for sure, are nothing but user IDs and passwords. But we still struggle with user IDs and passwords, don't we? Interesting. But digital identities are no longer closer to user IDs and passwords. So what are digital identities? Anybody could think about? I strongly believe digital identities are nothing but maybe the better you, or maybe the worse you. Digital identities are your personal thoughts, what you do, when you do, what profession you're in, what time do you get up, where do you write, what do you write, are you an artist, are you maybe a cybersecurity specialist, where do you store your data? All of this literally constitutes your digital identity, which means the digital avatar that you carry is more or less you and me, right? It mirrors who you are. Is it likely to be a challenge in the next 10 or 20 years? I strongly believe it's likely to be a challenge in the next 20 odd years because somebody already knows who you are even before you're there, right? It has its own pros and cons. But interestingly, I think the identities that you're looking forward is nothing but likely to mirror you. Let me take a step back. Let me take maybe 2 minutes to forget about identities and talk about evolving business models. The idea and the idea of trying to talk about evolving business models is trying to actually relate where is the world going with identities. There are typically three business models emerging across the world. Model number one is outcome-based model. I'm sure you would have heard this before. What is outcome-based model? Today, probably you buy a car, not because the car looks good, not because it's a Ferrari. Well, I'm sure you have a lot of Ferraris here, but you no longer buy those cars because the car runs faster, the color is good. You buy cars today because the cars seem to engage with you. The outcome of the product that you're trying to consume is becoming more and more important. If Ferrari was to give you that outcome, probably that would have been valued at $1 trillion, not maybe Tesla. And Tesla is not valued at $1 trillion only because it's trying to come out with different ways to fuel a car. It's valued at what it is valued because it is creating an engagement outcome model for you. You would want your hospitals to probably know, even before you walk into the hospital, what is wrong with you. And so is what is happening with maybe the retail stores, wherein you come in probably after 6 months and say, hey, good morning, Anil. You've been not in the store for so long. I know you like maybe XYZ. Why don't I offer you a discount because you've not been there? So the outcome-based models is likely to probably be there in the next 10 or 20 years, which is very, very interesting. The second model, which is evolving, is hyper-personalization. I'm not sure you've had the experience of hyper-personalization. What it really means is that if you want to buy a Nike shoe, you would want to get it personalized to who you are and what you are. Maybe you like blue color, maybe you like black, maybe you like gray, maybe you like light shades of green or red. Doesn't matter. So if you go to US, probably you could have a Nike shoe delivered to you in 20 minutes with the way you like it. Can you imagine if manufacturing 4.0 comes up, right, and you have API-based manufacturing happen? And maybe, in India, for example, we have a star called Shah Rukh Khan. I'm not sure if you're aware about him here or not, but maybe Shah Rukh Khan wants to manufacture 20 such cars. So he looks up on something like an Amazon and figures out, hey, you know what? There is a production capacity in Philippines which is available overnight, which could actually manufacture 20 cars for me in the color that I like because that's my persona, that's my identity. And in the way that I would want to structure a car. So he presses a button and figures out that this is the design he wants, this is the color that he wants, and these cars have to be manufactured just in time to be delivered to you just in time. How interesting is that? It's likely to happen very, very soon. Technologies are all available. It's a only question of when do they get executed. Music, for example, is going to be hyper-personalized. The last one here, let me talk about access versus ownership. And this is something that all of us here are aware about. Everything seems to be moving to cloud, whether we like it or not, right? And people and the younger generation today don't want to own a car, they want to enjoy it. Don't want to own a house, they want to enjoy it, right? Similarly today, interestingly, you don't want to own a software, you want to probably use a software. And maybe if the technology changes, you want to move on to the next one and so on and so forth, right? Of course, there are concerns around it and so on and so forth, but access versus ownership happens to be one of the foundation. Who's saying this? I'm not saying this. Please look up the World Economic Forum report and you would realize that these are the business models which are emerging. Why am I talking to you about business models in a cybersecurity conference? It's very important for us eventually to connect everything back to what is likely to happen. And these business models, I'm not sure if you realized or not, but they are all related to identity and the context of who you are. Hyper-personalization, outcome is for you. Hyper-personalization is for you. Access versus ownership. You want to access something and enjoy it. It's all coming back. Let me try and talk to you about digitalization. There are three buckets that you would probably work for digitalization. Bucket number one, digitalization for growth. Bucket number two, efficiency through digitalization. And the third one is really digital experience that you create. And believe me, the first one is what is likely to drive the business models. I personally believe identities are likely to drive business models in the future. Let me just try and take one example here. You have front office, middle office, and back office, and any organization that you're part of. Let me just try and maybe take one example. Insurance companies, for example. Have you heard of usage-based insurance? Like today, insurance is bought for your Ferraris and Maseratis, and you pay up a huge insurance on day one. Probably, maybe not in the future. You would only pay insurance when you drive the car. I come from a city called Mumbai, for example, right? And in Mumbai, if you drive the car to a certain PIN code location, which is accident prone, the bill that you get in the morning on WhatsApp may be $10. If my driver drives the car, probably $20 because he does not have a good context. Maybe if I drive the car, it's going to be $5, right? So usage-based insurance, hyper-personalized to a person, is all likely to come in, and I'm sure, hopefully, it should have been here by now as well. Just to try and wrap up the business models, telecommunication. Telecommunication was a business of voice, and then it was a business of value-added services. We have industrialist in our country called Mr. Ambani. He comes up and says, voice is a democratic right. I want to give it to you free, right? And data is the new oxygen. So he wanted to give it free for just about $10. What does that really mean? What it means is telecommunication companies are likely to become infrastructure companies. They're no longer likely to be telecommunication companies. What it means by infrastructure is you have the license, you've created the highway, pump what you want to pump on that highway. It doesn't matter, you've already bought it. They are likely to become content companies. And it is possible that Netflix could probably become a telecommunication company, or telecommunication company would probably end up buying a Netflix because content is likely to be interesting. But hey, that's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is, who's writing the content? It is people like you and me who are writing the content. The second one is banks are likely to be API oriented. Why? Because the fintech companies are making you engage with the bank. Well, just to take a step back, have you heard of Virgin Mobile? Most of us have heard of Virgin Mobile. But interestingly, as far as I know, Virgin Mobile does not even have a telecommunication license in London. What they are is MVNO. They collect minutes in wholesale and then they distribute minutes, right? So experience, personalization is all becoming very, very important. Travel becomes aggregators. Power in the US is likely to be produced by people like you and me. What does it change? It changes every piece of technology, right from net metering. Can you believe it also changes your accounting solutions, SAPs and Oracles of the world? Why? Because these accounting solutions that you have were never meant to have millions of vendors. They were only meant to have 100,000 vendors, not millions of vendors, right? What's happening across the world? Consumers are becoming producers. I repeat, consumers, that is people like you and me, are becoming producers. And let's come back to the topic. So what I was trying to connect was how the identities are completely getting converged into the business models, and identities are driving businesses. And CIOs and CISOs, please be aware, because the context of the risk has completely gone through a change. Governance is suddenly become a risk factor. Am I right? Governance is actually become a risk factor. Governance was always meant to mitigate risk. You set up governance processes and all of those standards that the gentleman spoke about to mitigate risk. They themselves have become risk actors. Why? Because investors and consumers are hyperactive today, right? And even the slightest inch of an issue with governance frameworks that you have, actually a CEO has to get on the podium and apologize for it. The second one is strategy and planning. All of us here, whichever business we were part of, we would always go back and say, can we invest in technology to grow our business? You know what? Why is disruption happening? Disruption is happening because technology is available. Disruption is happening because SaaS products are coming in and giving you good technology products for maybe $50 a user, $100 a user. You could actually have a banking software which is available to you for $200 a user. Because technology is available to you, that causes stress, and it is actually becoming a risk actor. Operations, customers are direct connected, and outcome is measured. And finally, compliance and reporting, you can't even make a mistake because the regulator has become smarter than what you are. They understand technology and reporting better than what you understand. So the risk framework is changing. Let me now try and talk about identities for the next 20 years. And I might sound a little dramatic for the next 2 minutes, but please, my apologies to you, but the intent is trying to drive home something. Hopefully, I get up in the morning 20 years from now, and a smartwatch probably connects to one of the Google Maps and tries and figures out that, hey, you know what? There is no traffic today, so he's going to reach office 10 minutes early, let him sleep, And maybe after 10 minutes, the smartwatch talks to the bed, nudges the bed, makes me wake up. I get up, it talks to the mirror, the bed talks to the mirror, it scans my body. They know that I've eaten a lot. It talks to the treadmill. The treadmill knows that I'm supposed to run 20 minutes more today, and the treadmill talks to the coffee, maybe to the geyser, because I like hot water bath in a particular way. And by the time I finish my bath, the geyser talks to probably the cappuccino machine. It knows that I like less milk. And by the time I finish my coffee, my dining table comes up with all the news that I want, and then it talks to the car to say, hey, you know what, take this gentleman to office. This is where the office is. And by the time the car is taking me there, maybe the bots are already running and creating reports that I intended to report, right? Sounds a little dramatic. Why am I trying to put it across to you in this conference around cybersecurity and identities? Everything that I spoke to you about, the smartwatch logs onto the map for me, which is Anil, which is context, is Anil goes to this particular office. The mirror is contextual, right? The geyser understands it. The mirror talks to maybe your treadmill. Again, the context is me. Now, that's not the only thing. Every machine talking to each other leads you to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and billions of machine identities. So machine identities with human identities, with context of who you are and where you are, just creates complexities enough for us to probably figure out, what is it that we want to do in the future. And that is likely to and is staring us in 10 years from now. Now, interestingly, all that things I spoke to you about, all the data that I spoke to you about, would be residing in the cloud. Why? You cannot do an artificial intelligence with just 2 transactions. You have to have a huge chunk of data. And unfortunately, all of this data is likely to be in the cloud, whatever I spoke to you about. And interestingly, somebody came in the morning and said, an adversary is like water. I want to say in capital letters, data is like water. What you have constructed comes to me and I change it a little bit, the context changes, and I send it to you, the context changes, and it flows to somebody else, the context changes. Data is literally like water. How do you protect data? Forget about being contextuality part of it, right? It is an interesting world. And you know what? We struggle to get our basics right. Sometimes we worry about the definition of privileged identities. We worry about definition of identities. We don't even know how to handle the bots which are coming up, how to monitor them. How does one manage hard-coded credentials, for example? I mean, these are some real-life challenges that we still continue to live with. Forget about what is likely to happen in the past. And just to try and wrap up the conversation, if you were to look at the security at the bottom layer, if you look at a PC, you harden the device, you control the admin privileges, you protect the endpoints with antiviruses and anti-malwares. And if you look at a level above that, you control applications and you give user IDs and passwords, and you give access controls. At the top layer, you probably have authenticators, multi-factor authenticators, and so on and so forth. What you're probably missing is that this is more device-centric security than anything else that you have. And if you were to find anything in the device-centric security would mean finding a drop in the ocean. Essentially, what I would want to suggest is that we need to reimagine identities. Identities and control is not a cost. How do I put it? You know why? Why do cars have brakes? Anybody here? Why do cars have brakes? In order to stop the car, right? No, cars have brakes because you want the car to run faster. If you wanted to stop the car, you would probably never construct a car. Correct? You want to run the cars faster. Please understand, your investment in what you're trying to do as CISOs and CIOs is not to put cost to the organization. It is to drive the organization faster, of course, to be in control. So the brakes in the cars are not to stop the cars. And what we would suggest, and I strongly recommend you, that you should look at contextual data going forward. And what is contextual data? It could be anything and everything that one could think of. Just about 3 parts. Personal thoughts, likes, dislikes, and what do you do could be one context. When you do it, where you do it could be one context. Where you store and how you store could be one context. And if you build this contextual framework, that is where you're going to save. And that is where you're going to save yourself because, and especially in this region, data sensitivity is likely to be more and more important, including the privacy. And that is where you actually figure out what is going to be right and wrong. And we at Arcon, we understand the problem statement. I don't know right or wrong, but what we're trying to build is an identity-centric solution which has got contextual data model below the solution, right? And just wanted to wrap this up quickly. quickly to say, we are not saying this. This is from the Gartner latest reports, Emerging Global Trends 2022. And two themes are emerging. Theme number one, identity access management solution, no. It's identity threat detection and response. The second is digital supply chain integrity. And the identity threat detection and response is something that I would encourage all of you here to look at, because that is likely to be the future, because security is likely to be identity centric. And we at Arcon, I probably not want to read this out, but we at Arcon actually tick all the boxes when it comes to identity threat detection and response. So this is what I just wanted to put across to your minds, and try and probably get to the point where to suggest that it becomes important for you to look at data contextualizations and start creating the models, because you cannot do it 10 years from now. You'll probably have to do it today because you built it over a period of time. So thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. I thought this was just an idea that we wanted to present to you, and appreciate the fact that you've been quietly listening to me. Thank you.